Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Artful Leadership, the interview series. Today, I am looking forward to having Kendrick Dial on the show. Kendrick is a pretty special guy here in San Diego who somehow has his hands in everything that's going on with the arts and music and poetry, as well as social change and really creating transformative experiences for all kinds of people in the arts. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from him and everything that he's got going on. Well, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed on this fun little show I'm creating.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
Hey, mixing it all up and bringing it together.
Yeah. I'm having a lot of fun just kind of creating relationships with all kinds of different artist leaders in San Diego. And I'm hoping that it will spread outside of San Diego because there's just such an incredible community of people doing great work in the arts. So the Artful Leadership interview series is really about, there's a couple of things that we're doing here. One of them is providing a resource for people in the field, just so they kind of have these ideas of what are all these different ways that people are working in the arts to bring social change and personal transformation and community change, and also to highlight the people who are behind great work. Because I think in our field, in arts-based therapies and education and stuff, I think we spend a lot of time looking at the outcomes and like what's happening for the youth. And I think sometimes we forget to take a look at who are the people behind the work, because I think it takes a really special person to do the kind of work that you do, that I do. And I feel like those people don't get the recognition that they deserve. And so I'm having fun just getting to know people and hearing their stories and all the amazing work that you put into being the artist leader that you are. So that's kind of where we're going with this. Yeah. So I know a little bit about you, but could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing these days in the arts?
Gotcha. So my name is Kendrick Dow. I am a social worker by trade, if you will. Work as a counselor at a community college and also facilitate some groups with child welfare services in terms of training social workers and working with African American families, and then also doing some strength finder coaching. So I, as an artist, I do spoken word, I do music. I have a band called the Lyrical Groove. I do some acting, I do a little playwriting. So all of that mixed in.
Kind of all over the place.
All that mixed in together.
Yeah. So your path really kind of started when I first started hearing about you, you were in the social service world. So you were working with homeless youth and youth in, various kinds of precarious situations. And that has evolved for you. What has kind of been your journey as an artist and a social worker, like kind of combining those two?
So for me, I actually started probably around 2000. So I used to be in the military. That's what brought me out here. And in that time, when I was about 1999, when I was stationed in Japan, it was a really challenging space for me, just being so young, being away from family, culture shock, like all these different things. But I was fortunate enough to start, I really got into reading Black literature at the time, and just reconnected with my appreciation for poetry. And so I would, read it and write in journal, and then that eventually turned into me writing my own stuff. And so when I got here to San Diego, I started looking for those opportunities to kind of get up and share and do poetry and whatnot. And so I actually started out in the spoken word performance side of things, doing open mics and things of that nature. And, and then my last 3 years in the Navy, I was a substance abuse counselor. And so that was kind of when I saw an opportunity to kind of use poetry in a way that could kind of connect with the mental health field and whatnot. So at that point, I really just kind of made it my journey to use the arts with wherever I was, whenever I could. And so when I got to the military, we started working with homeless and runaway youth and things of that nature. And just the friendships and the bonds I made through the creative community, working with and Black, Rudy Francisco, and Chris Wilson, we started doing Elevated, did another venue called the Psalmist Hour. So it was also about creating spaces for artists to come and perform and share as well. And so just through my evolution, I've always kind of kept my artistic pieces, I've always found ways to implement them in things that I'm doing or connect them somehow. So for me, it's just, it's very much a part of my life. And I think that's actually kind of the fortunate piece about my experiences, because just as much as some folks might know me in the mental health field or social justice, so to speak, then, it's, they know that the artistry comes along with it. Uh,
Right.
so, which is a beautiful thing for me, because I think that was one of my challenges in the military as a radar technician. It was like they wanted the sailor. They didn't necessarily want the artist. So when I got to be a counselor and I was able to bring the artistic, I just found that there was so much more fulfillment for myself, and the impact that I was able to make on people as well. So it really all kind of came together from that.
Right. And so, I mean, the arts enrich that work so much.
Right.
And then I would imagine having these really meaningful, kind of deep, soulful, change making experiences also feeds into your art. So
Yeah.
there's a nice loop.
Yeah. Next, it's kind of one of them things that I realized sometime, like probably years, like in the midst of it, because the artistic world, especially from a music or even a poetry standpoint or theater, is touring and going all over the place and doing all this stuff. And for me, I really found that piece, that the work that I do as a social worker in that capacity really informs the type of art that I create. And
Mhm.
also that lends itself to impacting people in a certain way because of the type. So it's like this really beautiful circle that kind of happens with the art as well as the work, and they go back and forth.
Yeah. Do you have any projects that you're working on right now that you're especially excited about in that regard?
Actually, yeah. So I'm working on another album with my band, the Lyrical Groove. Got a lot of pre-production stuff done, so definitely before the end of the year, I'll have another project done. And then I'm also working on. I was able to do a writing workshop with the La Jolla Playhouse, and so developed a play just kind of dealing with my life experience, kind of moving through relationships, being a father, what that looks like as a Black man, and just a man in general, connecting with all these different emotions, and how my growth from a child impacts that. And so my artistry is, I got music, poetry, playwriting, like everything really is coming together with that. So I'm pretty excited. And I did a reading of that back in like November and got a lot of good feedback. So I'm pretty
Right.
excited. But I haven't been in the space to do a lot of work with it lately. So
Right,
yeah.
right. So, well, that's really cool that you can have these experiences after having done all this work with communities and with young people and stuff, and then to kind of put your story out there in a really big way. I
Right.
would imagine that's pretty rewarding and also deeply reflective at this point in your life and your work.
Yeah, it's scary.
Right?
Yeah, but you laugh at
Yeah.
ability to get out there.
Yeah. So are you continuing to do any work with youth at all these days, or have you really shifted your work to other arenas?
So right now I work as a counselor at City College, and so we work in the EOPS department, which is
Mhm.
first generation students, low income, things of that nature. So, and so from the counseling aspect, but then I also work as I teach a personal growth class.
Mhm.
So those students are like right out of high school, um, and so kind of get an opportunity to kind of, for 8 weeks, get to live with them and help them, make this transition of, from high school to, adult schooling. So just do that. I think it's a little bit, my work right now in terms of youth is a little bit more indirect. The impact is there in different ways, or sometimes I get brought in to speak or perform or something like that in different capacities. So it kind of looks a little bit more like that as opposed to like directly all the time,
Right.
uh,
Right.
which is another piece of as we grow through this space of like you realize the different ways that you can impact people, and
Mhm.
so you know now like the work that I do as a social worker, training, social workers on how to work with African American family, that definitely is going to impact some youth or whatnot. So it's also I've been growing into learning, the different levels of impact that we have, and and just, you know, if I trained a classroom of 20 something social workers, that exponential reach that's there because of that.
Right. And then that kind of speaks a little bit more to like leadership in a sense, like really, yeah. And that's kind of where I'm heading with my work too, is that I'm a little bit less in the rooms with the kids and a lot more prepping the staff and inspiring and training them so they can do their best work and get more bang for our buck in a sense, you know, because me just in there one-on-one only goes so far. So yeah.
What's that like for you?
To
So
make that transition or
yeah, making that transition and recognizing that impact in a different way, and just, you know, actually working more with grown-ups instead.
well, it's been really satisfying for me because I think for, you know, I've been working with youth with homelessness for like 25 years now. And it's a very because they're in survival mode, there's only so much range that they're really able to take on with the depth of the work. And, you know, they're surviving and they're coping. So there's a lot of like holding a safe space for kids and giving them a voice. It's been super exciting for me to work with adults who are really ready to go, you know, and who are super hungry to learn and who are excited and who don't have all the same barriers that kids that have so much trauma or so much adversity, where, you know, when they come to my trainings, they're lined up at the door and they're like, what's she gonna have us do today, you know, and they're like ready to jump in. And they're also dealing with a lot of burnout, and they're dealing with a lot of meetings that are tedious and challenging, and where there's a lot of like trying to figure out how are we going to solve these issues. And then when they get to come to like the professional development or training opportunities, because I infuse so much of them with like experiential components and the arts, and sometimes we're rapping and drumming, and sometimes we're dancing, and sometimes we're improvising things, or we're collaging or drawing, and that just rejuvenates and refreshes them so much, and it builds a community within the team that I think they don't really get that kind of interaction in that particular way anywhere else. And so that's been really rewarding. And it's also really fun for me to be, you know, walking down the halls and seeing staff have conversations with kids or trying things with kids that I'm like, hey, I know you got that. So that's been really cool. And I think, to be honest, I got to a point where I was just like, I just am kind of tapped out on trauma stories. And I just don't want to sit in this room and hear about the rapes and the molestations and the murders and the shootings and the, you know, and all. I was just like, after 10 years of doing that full time, I was like, I want to come from a re-energizing place and give that away to the team and let other people kind of handle that for a little while.
That's real. I actually recently decided to get my LCSW.
Really?
Kind of because of that same reason. Like, I coming out of the military and then doing the direct service work and whatnot, I was like, you know what? I'm not trying to be a pretty, you know, counseling day in, day out.
Yeah.
And so I know that's why I kept my distance for a minute, but then gradually saw myself doing it unintentionally. And so I was like, let me go ahead and, you know, add this to the repertoire, so to speak. So
Yeah. And I kind of am deciding to go in more of a consulting direction and go in a business direction. And just kind of see where I can go with that for a while. I know I will eventually come back to direct service because I love to do therapeutic work. I just feel like I need to like get out and see some new faces and, you know, and start a movement and do some of those things. But you have a consulting business as well, don't you?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So it's still growing, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it started from wanting to work with artists and creatives in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and be a very unique bunch. But I really just got tired of. I'm tired of hearing the tragic artist story, the suicides and things of that, the overdoses that, you know, we so many creators find, and so it really came out of that in terms of wanting to support those particular populations, and then also recognizing that I think on a bigger level, like, we need to change the way that we look at creativity. So yes, most people are creative, and unless they paint, draw, poet, something, dance, act, they'll say they're not creative. And so I'll have these conversations, and I talked to a gentleman. I was like, "What do you do?" And he was like, "I'm a field trauma nurse." I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "Well, somebody crashes in, a hillside or mountain or whatever, and then, I get helicoptered in to stabilize them so that they can get helicoptered out." So I'm
Right.
like, "You got to stick like cut a hole in the trachea or something like that. You can do that." It's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Is that not creative?" He's like, "I never thought about it like that."
Right.
And so how many implications does that have for the kid who is maybe a little bit more rambunctious and expressive, in terms of how they may get dismissed. And then also the kid who is more scientific and logical and strategic, and their creativity doesn't even get validated. And so they grow up saying, "Well, no, I'm not that creative," when it's very much a creative to be a scientist, right? Um, so it's really just wanting to kind of reshape how we look at creativity and whatnot. Because when I did the play with the La Jolla Playhouse, we did the pop tour of the Home of the Brave. I joke, but I'm serious when I say I felt like I did more work with that play than I did the 9 years I was in the military. Like it was that trick, like to have somebody sitting there and saying, "Okay, break, y'all got 10 minutes, go to the bathroom, come back, bam. All right,
Right.
start time." Like, I don't know too many people that be able to keep their job if somebody was there telling them, "Okay, you got 10 minutes to use the bathroom, get back here so we can get started." Like, um, but just recognizing, like, in a theater production, the cues and how many different people have to be on the same page, and the execution and the timing and everything, is real. And then the level of work and carpentry and design and everything that comes together. So I think a lot of times the creative world isn't given the respect is due,
Right.
in that sense and whatnot. So I struggle with saying, like, um, somebody asked me, "What all do you do?" I was like, "Well, I do this." Well, for your real job, and so
Right.
all of that.
Yeah. 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 So how do people, if you're trying to kind of expand this notion of creativity, who are your clients, or how do you get these folks to consider that, who's your clientele?
So, I started out with a workshop called "Defining Your Artistry or Creativity," where we just explore, like, to some of the stuff that you're doing, like all forms of art, like whatever that may look like, and helping folks understand what their creative process needs to be. Because for some, in the realm of doing a specific type of artistry, you don't need to be a full-time artist. Some people just need to have a little something they could do once a month to express themselves in this creative space. uh, I think the other side is, in terms of connecting with others, is like when I may present at like a school or to some administrators or whatnot, helping them understand, like, the person who can put together a filing system is an artist. Like, if you recognize that as artistic as I can be in all these other rooms, that's something that I can't do. And
Right.
so when you recognize that that's an art, like, just like we have great teachers who know how to work with students and connect with students, like, even that's an art. And I think it's kind of redefining, artistry as a skill, on some level. And just also for me is recognizing, like, yo, everybody has a level of creativity. Like, there's a spiritual component of, like, being connected to the creator. And if we're reflections of the creator, we are creators ourselves. So uh, being able to understand what that looks like. And if you're a person who can create order out of chaos, then you're an artist at its so.
Yeah. So are there any like authors or other artists or key like thinkers or anything that inspire you in your work?
Um, Actually, Questlove is kind of one of my favorite stories. I'm reading his book now, his second book on creativity. Yes. Um,
I'm like, it's right.
yes. Yes. So I love him, and just I think his stories. One of my favorite books is by Victor Wooten. He's a bass player, a phenomenal bass player. And this book is called The Music Lesson. And he uses all these lessons about, he tells like a fictional story, but he uses these elements of music to also relate to life. in terms of like, you know, dynamics, in terms of how loud you play, and all the timing, space, all these different elements. And so he's kind of like my cornerstone in terms of like seeing how to blend these two worlds, so to speak, real life as well as the artistic space.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. There's a guy that I've read. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, Seth Godin, and
Okay.
he does a lot of like business coaching and stuff. But he has a book called Linchpin, and it's all about what you're saying, where each person has a very specific, unique gift that is their art.
Right.
And he really expands that idea of what art is. And art is whatever you're doing when you're in sort of like your natural state of giving to the world, and the way you bring order or bring something special to wherever you are that kind of keeps things together. And that's art. And it's just a super cool book about the importance of just giving it away, and being who you are. But it's a very different, it's more of a metaphorical look at what art is. But I read it a few years back, and it really inspired me to just take a look at things differently in my work, and, you know, how to work as a creative and how to view those things differently. So very cool. Are there any folks that are doing stuff in San Diego right now that you would like to shout out or highlight?
Um, so off the top, my first person that comes is my friend Berenice.
Mm,
Strawberry, you know Berenice.
I know better, yeah.
She's just an amazing artist. I love the things she's come up with. I think I met her when I was working with San Diego Youth Services at the time, and so it was funny because I got to put her in my documentary about it's called Healing for the Helpers or something like that, in terms of how we as professionals deal with burnout. But just everything that I actually had a chance to talk to her not too long ago, and just she's finishing up her program, has this, you know, mural thing that she's doing, and she's been doing these other things that, you know, in Barrio Logan area. So she's always somebody I'm looking out for. My buddy Gil Sotu, he's always he has a couple of plays that are just phenomenal. He's actually kind of the reason I got back into acting, because he asked me to play a role in one of the plays he wrote, and so just kind of kept things going. But he has two. I want to say they're in like talks with the Old Globe or whatnot. And then I'm doing some work right now with my BK Soul family. So it's like an ensemble, poets, musicians, vocalists, dancers. And so we're doing a show with the theme of get free. And so we're exploring all these different elements of what does it mean to actually get free. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned them, because I was going to ask you if you guys had anything coming up that you were working on, because the stuff that I've seen that you guys have done was really, really fabulous.
yeah, we actually next week, I think it's next week, we'll be doing the live arts showcase that happens at NTC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Very cool. So you mentioned like you kind of made your way into poetry when you were in the military. Was that kind of a new thing for you, or did you have any kind of connection to the arts and music as a young person? Like, what was your first?
I had to ask myself that question after some time. But you know what? Because I didn't grow up in like a musical family. I didn't grow up, you know, cousins and folks playing instruments and stuff like that. But what did happen was I would always have to do Christmas, Easter poems, right? And then as I grew up in the church, I was on the usher board. Of course, I was in the choir. And then I was in the usher board. But in the usher board, and this is the part that really just hit me one day, is I would have to sit at the door that was right behind the band. So Sunday after Sunday, I was right there with the choir director, the cue, the pianist, the bass player, the drummer, and I'm sitting up here soaking in all these dynamics and whatnot. And I didn't even realize until probably within the last 10 years that was probably like my training ground in terms of like musicality and performance and whatnot on such a deep level. So
Kind of soaking it all in, and
yeah, so
yeah, very cool. And then that didn't sort of really come to fruition until years later.
Yeah, and actually, like I did write poetry like all through high school, just a bunch of crushes that I never gave into.
Yeah.
Uh, but I, I did a lot of writing in that capacity or whatnot, but it was nothing that I shared with anybody or anything like that. So
Right.
even getting to the point of like speaking in public and stuff like that, that was maybe I think I did a talent show in maybe like the 11th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna tell you the name of that one. That was
That's top secret information.
yeah, it's like yeah. I don't know if I should have. I was talking to a friend. I danced in that particular talent show and I did a poem. And both of them, I'm like, how did we get away with that at that age? Like, they. I'm glad there's no social media because it's kind of wild, it's kind of raunchy. I was like, it's like, where did you get this, boy?
Thank God for analog days, right?
Yes. I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have made it.
That's hilarious. Um, but one of the things that I know we kind of already went there, but I think one of the things that I admire a lot about you is how you have done such an incredible job of keeping your artist alive and really letting it flourish. And I think a lot of us who are in this sort of arts-based transformational work really struggle with that balance. And I'm just really curious if you had any like tips for people like me or other people who are doing like creative work with youth or with difficult populations or whatever. How do people do that, really keep that artist identity alive?
So let me make sure uh, that I'm hearing you right because for me, you're already doing it. And
Right.
so I want to know, I want to make sure I'm speaking to exactly, what you're questioning, so to speak.
Right.
So are you referring to just in terms of doing it or just really allowing myself to have my own quote artist identity outside of professional identity? Is that what you mean or how do you?
You're getting all specific.
Man, I want to speak right. I want to make sure I'm speaking to it.
Yeah. I think, well, for one, I mean, there's my own process that I'm in, and like this interview series for me is keeping my artist alive. It's me having this creative interaction with people and connecting to what's going on in the community. And I have my little, music that I play or different things that I do. But I want to do more in terms of like being involved in artistic activities and communities and ensembles and different things like that. And I think that a lot of the time other people like myself feel like, oh, well, I got to have my day job and I got to make sure I take care of all this stuff. And I haven't given enough faith to my own artistry to be able to be like, I can get out there and do some cool things, and those things can support me and nourish me and, be a part of my life just as much as this work that I'm doing to give away to others. And I've seen you kind of like navigate that in a way. And so I'm just curious, like how you've done that. And was there like a tipping point for you, or like how have you sort of balanced those things?
It's continuous.
Yeah.
I think part of it is a lot of people, because this is a story that you'll hear a lot. I used to paint, I used to sing, I used to
Right.
quit. And for
Yeah.
me, I never quit. Like,
Right.
just like the poetry has always been there, whether folks knew it or not. The music was there, and then I gave myself permission to truly explore and try those things. And I think a lot of people, we come from a society where it tells you, you need to have a specification, you need to pick one particular industry, and and go in that direction. And for me, I never took that opportunity away. And I always gave myself permission. Oh, if this want to try it, cool. I'm gonna get up there and try it. Oh, and I got to get up and work in the morning. So,
Right.
so it's really that. And so for me, and I know part of the way that I'm built is like, okay, in terms of this needed to feel productive or whatever, like I can get lost in that and be like, okay, if I'm sitting at home 7 o'clock on a Monday, I'm like, okay, what's wrong? Like, I need to be doing something. And so my creative outlets give me an opportunity to kind of continue to and flourish and explore. So I think for me, it's really about allowing yourself the opportunity to do it. And then like, making the time to do it.
Right.
Like,
Making it a priority. Yeah.
yeah, making it a priority. If it's really something that you really wanted, like, that's truly the only way. And for me, I know this also goes into what you value, right?
Right.
And so, and this is why I'm a social worker. So, so over money, I value time, right? I value my opportunities, my freedom. So I've been able to do a lot of jobs that allowed a lot of flexibility in terms of whatnot. So that also helped in terms of me being able to do that. But I have a friend, I've got tons of friends that still do different artistry things, right? And they work, like real intense full-time jobs.
Right.
And so a young lady that I know, she works at the airport authority. She definitely, she does all type of paintings and whatnot, and she does painting sips and whatnot. I, and so like it's, you really just have to make that choice to do it, right? I mean, even with raising kids, you have to be intentional about what you want them to expose them to, how, what type of experience you want them to have. And so if you look at your artistry in the same way, it's like, okay, there are things in your life that you just know you have to have. And if that's the case, how do you make that happen?
Right. Well, I'm curious for you how much the role of an artist community plays in that for you.
Um,
Because it seems like you're connected to others who are doing that.
that is such a huge role. Like, it's like a lot of times as you already know, in terms of, you're dealing with people who come from challenging situations, it's the environment that can either aid in terms of helping them get healthier, or it's going to make it that much harder for them to get healthier. And in that same space, if you're an artist, I feel like it's very important for you to be around or connected with other artists. I think being a part of Collective Purpose and BK Soul, like, I think some of the things that we did as when we kind of in the prime of that space, especially with Collective Purpose, is the fact that we had like this artist, I won't say competition, but that's what it low key was. And so we would get inspired from each other. It's like, damn, how did you come up with that? And then we go back to the table and and then it also allows you to push in terms of, okay, well, what's my thing? Like, this is their thing. What's my thing? And without that reflection of other artists to kind of challenge you to kind of see those things, you might not, even challenge yourself to go look for it.
Right.
It's like, well, nobody else is doing it, whatnot. But that artist community is important, which is one of the reasons why I really appreciate what you're doing. Because when I did my first workshop, I didn't even think about that piece in terms of like creating a community. Like, that wasn't even, I just wanted to, help people be creative. And then that was the biggest thing that came from it. So the fact that you're deliberately, setting the intention to help build this community, like, that's going to be what's going to transform so many people in ways that they didn't even know, because you create those connections.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm just enjoying already, I think this is like my sixth conversation or something, is how much love this community has for each other. And like every time I talk to somebody, they're like, they name somebody that's on my list. And there's just like all this great shout out and love that's going on. And I think that it's going to be really fun to capture this whole network of people.
Right.
And I feel like so much of our work has been focused out on like what impacts are we having in the community, and I think it would be fun to do some work on like, okay, well, who are we together and what do we create together? And and because I haven't been a part of that, and it's part of the reason why I want to create it, is because I haven't had it. I've been in this little box at Monarch, this little tiny office with no windows and low ceilings and fluorescent lights, and been in there 50 hours a week, just like, you know what I mean? And now I'm just like, I gotta get out and see the sunny faces of others, and there are just so many people doing incredible things. It's really fun to kind of get out and see what those are and connect to them and find new life in that.
Right.
Yeah.
It opened you up in ways. Like, I went and saw, who did I see? It was Syncopated Ladies,
Mm-hmm.
their tap dance troupe.
Uh-huh.
That was, and I'm like, I never would have thought I would. I was like, I need to go tap. Like, it's just like, but then, it settles onto you in a way that really lends itself for your experience.
Yeah.
So being able to commune with these different artists and just see things and have these conversations is huge. So this is
Right.
you're doing an amazing work right now.
Thank you.
I don't even think you know how big it is yet.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Also, I'm going to be doing trainings for the San Diego Creative Youth Development Network. So Matt DeRigo is developing that whole network of people who are doing creative youth development work. So you've got like Brandon, Derek, Jen Oliver, Tara, you've got this whole crew of people. And then I'm going to be doing trainings for all of those teaching artists on like how to be more trauma informed, how to be restorative, how you use your arts to like, promote transformative experiences and things. And it's just going to be so fun to like sit in front of like 30 amazing artists at a time, and really bringing those people together in a new way and training them in a new way. So, and not just like, these are 3 tips for blah, blah.
Right.
But like, who are we and what is our vision and how do we, connect to that? So I'm excited. And I appreciate that you kind of see what I'm doing. Cause sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I think it's big.
I think that part is just as much as the artistic journey that most give it credit for, and it's that willingness just to go and as a creator, you create. You don't everything that you need is not going to be there. You're not going to even see it.
Right.
But sometimes you just have to be courageous enough to just kind of go through the path, and magically enough, it starts to unfold right in front of you, piece by piece. The stuff that you need, stuff you didn't know you needed, it comes. So for me, it's been very much a faith journey in terms of like, I can't tell you how many opportunities came out of the fact that I created something.
Yes.
Right. And when you think about how people sit on ideas, they sit on something and whatnot, or because it doesn't have the monetary piece there already, or because such and such isn't backing it, they don't do it, not realizing that, if you created this, the other pieces that need to come will come. It may take a little time, but if you created that, also it's the space that allows for all those things to come together.
Yeah, and it really is crazy. Like recently, I invested like $5,000 in this leadership program that I'm doing, and I was like about to throw up, when I was like signing up for it, because I was like, I don't have $5,000. I don't even have that much on my credit card, and I'm gonna be like eking out my little payments or whatever. But it's crazy what happened as soon as I knew that I had to pay for that money. Suddenly, I was like, I can make this money. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do these workshops and I'm going to talk to these people and I'm going to, and suddenly it was like this whole new world opened up and I hadn't even been at the training yet. It was like, it's crazy what happens when you open yourself up to like those, just thinking bigger and having possibilities. So yeah, it's exciting. Well, for all the folks that are kind of watching this video series, because I have 8 subscribers.
Yeah.
Woo!
8.
No, but several of the videos have gotten like 80, 90, 100 views. So people are checking it out. But do you have any like words of wisdom or kind of ending message for people who are like us who might be watching this today?
Let me see.
What you got?
I'm gonna go to my creative engagement Instagram page because I try to post some things there from time to time, some inspiration.
Okay.
So let me see. Oh, I think you might. I'm gonna give you 2.
Okay.
So the first one is creatives shouldn't strive for perfection; they should strive for purpose. Right? I see that's a hookup with a lot of folks in terms of like it isn't quite. It is like, and looking for that, you dismiss so much, or miss an opportunity so much if you need it to be so. Now, don't get me wrong. I know in terms of in that artistic space where you're creating and whatnot, and you have a vision for it. But some people won't even move because they don't feel like they're perfect enough to do it.
Right.
And so connect with the purpose of why you're doing whatever that is. And the more you do it, you will get better. Like I think a lot of people get stuck on measuring somebody's, day, 2060 to their day one.
Right.
And it's like you can't do that. There's nothing that you're gonna start that's gonna be that that wonderful most of the time. So
Yeah, and sometimes that most raw stuff is the stuff that touches other people's hearts so much more than some like perfected
right, right.
piece, yeah.
And then the other one was many creatives forget or don't understand that the editing and revision stage is just important as the initial creation stage. And so sometimes we won't even get started, or we say that it's not perfect from jump, or it's like sometimes we want it to come out perfect from at the very beginning, and it's very much a work in progress, just like we are. So allowing you that space to like, okay, what I don't like about this, let me go rearrange and all of that. Like that's, don't look at that as separate from the creating process. Like that is part of the creating process. So making sure you connect with that is a beautiful thing.
Cool. So if people want to find a little bit more of you, where should they go?
So you can check out my website, still being developed, but it's pretty much there. It has all the different things I'm doing. And it's kendrickdial.com, and it's dial like Kendrick, like Lamar, dial like the soap. And so all my creative engagement stuff that I'm starting to do, performances, either solo with my band or ensemble stuff, is on there as well. So yeah, so kendrickdial.com, and then I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff as well. So Mr. Lyrical Groove and at the Lyrical Groove as well. So on Instagram. So all that.
All right. Cool.
So, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending a little time. It's been a pleasure.